two before the one. Wisdom is water, I'm the daughter of the cannon fodder. Applied knowledge and insight, a born scholar. Look like a martyr to marauders like Tartar. Wise owl slaughter, whack MCs order applauder. Original woman, decipher the womb. Crown of creation, fruit of the planet, earth and the moon.
Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to another episode of Wise the Dome. Today I have my brother again, Ngozi. Y'all know who he is, man. He's one of our great minds and great thinkers. It's always a pleasure to build with him and have him on the show. I appreciate you for coming on, G.
I appreciate you. Peace and love. Assalamu alaikum. I want to venerate Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba. Well, first of all, I want to give all praises to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Afterwards, I would like to pay homage to Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba for those who are part of the Murid Society and all of my Sufi brothers and sisters back home in Senegal, all the way through Nigeria, and even the ones in Sudan who have their own Sufi sect. I also want to pay homage to all of the righteous human beings globally that wants to liberate the world to see the earth in a better place and see people in a better stance when it comes to humanity and uplifting, who stand for the upliftment of humanity to make the planet a better place. So I want to pay homage to that. But like I said at first, we definitely have to pay homage to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the living infinite mind, pure consciousness that we identify as the Most High. Peace.
Peace, peace, peace. Indeed, indeed, man. I want to build with you. I'm gonna start with this, man. You know, when people are gaining knowledge itself, and if they're dealing with lessons like 120, and you know, the first degree, it asks, who is the original man? And we know the answer is the Asiatic Black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, father of civilization, God of the universe. On a scientific level, who is the original man?
The original man is the African man, the man that developed in sub-equatorial zones of the continent that we know today as Africa, Homo sapiens sapien. Now, if you want to get into the long stance of the original man, as in humans, when Homo developed, we talking about Homo habilis, handyman. And that's something totally different. Homo habilis, which phases out of the Australopithecus, and with the first Homo in genus when it comes to the taxonomy of Homo, humans, not species, our species of Homo sapiens, but Homo habilis. But outside of that, when it comes to modern anatomically correct humans, we're talking about people that develop in sub-equatorial zones within the continent of what we know today as Africa, African man. And even those Asiatics, they're left out 100,000 to 60,000 years ago. Crossed out of Northeast Africa in between Upper Egypt or Northern Sudan, and some people say around Northern Ethiopia, around Eritrea into Yemen, but they still dispersed out of Northeast Africa 100,000 years ago, and then they left again after that. You know, who brought the progenitor of E3b from EM35, from the Comarusians from EM35 into EB68 into the E3b and EZ827 and all those branches that left out. So either way, the Southwest Asian man or Asiatic man, whether it's distant Asiatic earlier or later, is Northeast African.
And so when we have a lot of people that like to deny now the fact that genetically we are African, what a lot of times they, you know, will use yeah, that's the white man science that y'all are using, you know, but as if, you know, original people all across the world aren't proficient in these sciences as well. Whenever you look at the science behind who we are as quote unquote African American people, culturally, you know, there are many links that we can show, whether it's from food, music, you know, religion, language, all of these different things that we can show the Africanisms within African American culture. When we are talking about genetics, how do we show and prove genetically that we are West and Central African?
I mean, autosomally, the average African North American Creole, because our situation, Black is a position, you know, that's been created social constructually. And Black is in kinship to populations that descend from Congoids, or and these Congoid speakers are primarily Niger Congo speakers that descend from Western Central Africa. So it's
I can't hear you.
it's based off. Could you hear me?
I can now.
It's based off autosomally, the African American Creole, or the African North American Creole via African. It ranges on average between 70 to 65% sub-Saharan African. In some cases, even higher if you come from the Carolinas. You got brothers that's 90% sub-Saharan African, and 60% of us are paternally haplogroup E3A or EM2, and our mitochondrial DNA is also matching with populations of Western Central Africa. And that right there is a signature that put us in a position based off the social construct of being Black, because we descend from sub-Saharan Africa, and we are that. We are those Congoids. Even though our situation in North America has been creolized from the hybrid cultural society that we formed in, and living amongst non-African populations who are primarily Northwestern Europeans. So it creolized us. So we accumulated some admixture. But overall, autosomally, we still range at 70 to 80, and if you're from Carolina, 90% sub-Saharan Africa. And with that signature, you're classified as Black. And if we base it off the old one drop rule, that's even worse. We got our Boricua brothers and sisters who may only be 35% sub-Saharan Africa. That's part of North America. And in some cases, they could be classified as Black. And in some cases, they could be even higher. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Indeed, indeed. And so that kind of leads me to the next question. We have brothers and sisters who are being oppressed in not only America, obviously, the continent, the Caribbean, Europe. Why is Pan-Africanism important for the diaspora?
Because it gives us a base to where we could connect back to, outside of just being, tied to the borders of the situation. America's a situation, a temporary situation that was established in 1776. We don't know how long this situation is going to occur. Ethnicities can come and go. And again, these positions can be established and collapse. We don't know what is going to be in the next 50 years. So for us to be able to repatriate back and have a banner back home on the continent as a foundation is just like when our Mexican brothers or Mexican cousins can go back to Mexico and have a connection. No matter how long they've been here, they can still go back. Or some European people in North America can go back to the UK and France, because that's the typical mindset of most people. When we want to visit places, we want to go to Europe somewhere overall. So with you having a connection back home on the continent where you're genetically, biologically, you share the genetic affinities with these populations, it puts you in a better position to not just be bound off a temporary situation called America. So it's very important, because it's not that everybody should be Pan-African, because that's not how the world works. You're going to have people on a continent that's anti via African Americans, and you're going to have people within America that's anti-African. Those type of people will be classified as ops. They're not beneficial to me. And most of the people that's Pan-Africans in Africa who truly understand the bigger picture, they don't control their government. Right. A lot of the government is flunkies, and they have ties with the corruption of what goes on in other places or other parts of the world. So you have to be very careful. Pan-Africanism is not for everybody. It's for those who truly are aware and understand a bigger picture.
Indeed.
So it's important for you to have your dual citizenship, or for you to have a network with people back home and bond as a family, so you won't be always stuck in a specific position or a temporary situation. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. I think you made a good point. I kind of want you to expound on that a lot. So like America is a settler colonial project that Europeans came, enacted genocide on the Native Americans, and used Africans for their labor. With that said, what are your thoughts on this new push where a lot of people in the so-called conscious community are embracing American ideals and imperialism as long as they can benefit from it? I hear a lot of people say now that, hey, I don't have nothing to do with Africa. I'm American, right? And they proudly say this. And I'm from the school where, like Malcolm, man, we're not American, we Africans in America. You know what I
Right.
mean? I am American through citizenship, but I
Well,
try my best to not have my ideals aligned with the oppression of others.
well, well, this place is a business. It's a corporation. And for those that want to get caught up in a business over over their true foundation, let them do what they do. They're opportunists. They have the same mindset based off what's beneficial to them overall. And that's cool when it comes to survival. So they are in struggle survival mode
Mm,
mentally.
hmm.
And with that place, let them stand where they stand because it's not for everybody. When it falls, they're going to fall. If it falls, they will fall,
Right,
you know.
right, right.
So once we fully understand a bigger picture of what's going on,
Hmm.
um, um, they got their place and their position. So we're gonna let them be. Everybody your so-called color isn't your kind.
Hmm.
And the idea of having the same mentality, we living in a whole new time and era. You
Hmm.
get what I'm trying to say, God?
Right, right.
So when we truly understand that, let them be where they are. Yes, by nationality, we are all that. I
Hmm.
mean, this place is a hotel.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so if you want to rep that,
Hmm.
that's beautiful. But
Hmm.
again, it's only a situation.
Mm. Right,
What's your true stance? It's
right,
only a situation. And within the situation, there are positions.
right, right. But those positions that we are afforded in that situation are not going to be positions of real power.
No, I mean, none of it will. And that's
Hmm.
why it's important for you to move as a man, all
Hmm.
of us,
Hmm.
on what men are supposed to do. And those who are in tune with manhood or the mind within itself, whether they're from a continent or here, we understand a bigger picture. You
Mm.
know, certain things shouldn't be and couldn't be televised.
Mm.
It's a lot of ops and it's a lot of fucked up people out here that would twist things.
Right.
So again, let those people have their place.
Hmm.
Those people that think like that. If they think that this is all it is,
Yeah, yeah, they'll have that wake up call sooner or later.
yeah.
Um, I kind of
Because
speak.
I'm gonna tell you something, God.
Mhm.
You get the brother from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the Caribbean, African America, Afro Latina, Afro Puerto Rico, whatever. And they go to the UK, they go to France, they go to other nations. We're all looked at as the same,
Mm.
regardless of what you want to call yourself.
Right,
You look
right.
at it is it the same? And in the UK, you can look it up. The discrimination that goes on amongst Afro Caribbean people and
Mm.
continental Africans.
Hmm.
They're treated like the populations of people in North America.
Mm.
So, I hate to hear the ADOS and FBA say, they're not this, they're not that, they're not black, and they're coming taking our jobs. Something that
Mm.
was not yours, but something that's given to you from somebody else.
Right, right,
They're all falling into the trap of the delineation thing now. And the plan worked,
right, right. That's the sad part. It's like, man, the plan worked and it's damn near on autopilot right now. I was watching the news and I saw, as we've seen like the past 2 years, there's been an attack on Black history books in public schools. And I saw in Florida where DeSantis, he just removed the AP African American history program in public schools. um, I guess he said, paraphrasing, but he said something to the effect that it's not important. What are your thoughts on the attack on Black history uh, by quote unquote right wing conservatives now?
Well, the line of defense that that we are in now, it's not enough of us that care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So people are going to get away with what they can when they see that, you know, there's no protection in those banners or angles anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So because the world knows that we don't take that serious as we used to in the 60s and 70s and 50s, people can do what the fuck they want to do to us now.
Mm-hmm.
And they can change the position however they want to. Because
Right.
it's not enough of us that really care about it or stand on it.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are not on one accord, standing on what we supposed to, you're going to get shit like this.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? I ain't even mad at them.
Right.
I'm more mad at us
Mm-hmm.
that choose to accept that position.
Mm-hmm. Right. How important is it for us, you know, as adults and, you know, with our children to make sure that we, you know, make our history and liberation struggles and our culture, how important is it for us to keep that at the forefront, you know, for our own education and our children's education?
It's very important because we have to be able to, again, to have a global network with our brothers and sisters back home once the situation go through what it's going to go through.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's also very important for them to have a sense of identity in a deteriorating system or culture. You get what I'm saying? To have a stance. Everybody else have one. Why can't we have one?
Right.
You know, the Mexican can embrace Mexico. The Italian can embrace Italy, and they have a sense of confidence when they do it. So it's very important for us to be able to have our identity banner
Mm-hmm.
for what we want to be,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives you a sense of pride and hope because you shouldn't just be minimalized to the idea of just being what we classify just black. Okay, what else?
Right.
You know, what ethnicities do you understand about this thing called black, or what do you tie back to? And when you fully understand it, it gives you so much strength and confidence in yourself to know what's what, yo. You know.
Mm-hmm. What I wanted to ask you this from a scientific level. You know, a lot of times when I have some conversations online about those who deny, you know, being of African descent, they'll say, "Yo, we Asiatic, right?" And one thing that I always point out in uh, Message to the Black Man, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, he I'm paraphrasing, but he said that we are Asiatic from the continent of Africa. A lot of people like to skip over that. But whenever you think of the term Asiatic from a scientific level, um, or the term Asiatic Black man from a scientific level, how would you break that down?
Um, the lessons teaches us Asia means body, Attic means mind. So that's very symbolic. Mind, body, man, original man. But from a scientific angle, um, the first Asiatics that crossed into West Asia via the out of Africa migration was Northeast Africans, a Tyrian culture. And even with us, with haplogroup EM2, which comes from EB38, which comes from E1B1, which comes from EP177, which comes from early EM96, paternally developed in between the corridor of North Africa, the same population that dispersed out of Africa. So when I think about the Asiatic Black man, I think about the earlier Paleo-Saharan or Paleo-North Africans who gave all of us E. You know what I'm saying? And mixed with other populations as they went south of the Sahara. And they mixed with those early East African hunter-gatherers and Mbuti groups and even ghost populations, creating a new, this hybrid that we formed into in tropical zones in sub-equatorial Africa. But when I overall think about Asiatic Black man, I think about Paleo North Africans, which is the predecessor root of even our paternal line. That's what I think of.
And so was there ever a time, because, you know, a lot of people now say that there was never a Black presence in North Africa.
The concept of Black, how we see it today, is fairly new. The original humans that were in North Africa were dark skinned because certain mutations for light skin didn't exist. Homo sapiens sapiens develop in equatorial zones. So it only makes sense that they would have been dark. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the early Aterians who lived up there 100,000 years ago came from East African populations that dispersed north. So they didn't have mutations on chromosome 15 for lighter skin or OCA2. So they would have been dark. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And you always had people, even when the idea of congoids, which is the protrusion mandibular or prognathism, flatter noses, super darker skin, you do have them drifting in those zones when they became tropical adapted or went through the accumulation mixture from population south. They drift there, but the original humans that were there, because we're all humans, would have been dark skinned. But in morphology, they wouldn't have not looked like uh, uh, um, the later derived Congoid populations. So when they say that, it's kind of tricky because people are dealing with a racist view or model.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, the original Paleo North Africans were dark skinned. You know, it only makes sense. Even if we use certain PCAs, like the gene predictors, it talks about the tepheric groups in the Neolithic portion of North Africa when they form into the Abderoma. Some of them had intermediate brown and some of them were dark brown, still lacking SLC2485. Intermediate brown is your color and my color.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you considered what you're considered in your position?
Right. Right.
And then some of them would have been dark because one of the Abiromaruza or tepheric groups was that if we base it off the PCA or principal component analysis that was used. So this new thing that they're using, I wouldn't get caught up in that.
Mm-hmm.
But the straightforward answer is what they're trying to say was, were the North Africans on average Congoids? No, they were not. Congoid morphology of people that you see in typical morphology that's common in sub-equatorial borders. Now, in earlier times, when humans first developed, did they look like the later derived morphology that people have? Mutations adjust based off time. So it doesn't make sense. What we're looking at is multiple mutations. Some things is later derived. For skin tone, the original Homo sapien was dark. It only makes sense because he developed in tropical equatorial zones.
Right, right. That kind of brings to the next question. You got a lot of classic videos on YouTube. One clip, obviously, that went viral and probably goes viral every year is whenever you were breaking down the SLC2485 mutation. And then, so when I first heard that, when I saw that video back in the day, that's my first time hearing that science, right? And then, so whenever I think about the story of Yakub, I look at that. A lot of people may not agree with me, but I look at that as an allegory for that science. If you can explain what the gene expression was for lighter skin, how it came about, and when it came about.
So a variant arose around 30,000 years ago that was responsible for the predecessor root for the later downstream mutations. It did not fully express itself. Other genes were active in these people that was out of the continent, somewhere around the Arabian Peninsula. So it didn't fully express itself, but the variant arose, right? And this variant was responsible for making way for alanine to change its position into thymine. And at this time, around 30,000 years ago, once the variant arose, without fully expressing itself, these people were still dark. They just developed a variant from outside of the continent. Around 12,000 years ago, you found the first expression of it. 12,000 to 20,000. It was happening in increments, but you found the first fully expression of it around the subsperchier cave near the Caucasus, or subperchier cave near the Caucasus, if I'm pronouncing it right, around 12,000 years ago, when alanine changed its position to thymine on chromosome 15. they developed fairer skin, these hunter-gatherers near the Caucasus. Around 8 to 9,000 years ago, some of these hunter-gatherers near the Caucasus mixed with populations near Anatolia, the people that was responsible for building Göbekli Tepe, and they started to deal with farming. Now, with farming, you lack certain things, nutrients and certain things, depending on a lot of grains and barley and wheat. That also helps enhance based off sexual selection with the mixing with population from the Caucasus and certain positioning of what you're depending on in your body. It makes way for alanine to change its position into threonine on chromosome 15 for this mutation to fully express itself. So these early Neolithic farmers start to expand around 8,500 years ago and 9,000 years ago. And then it starts to stand out 6,500 years ago. So we have to look at the time when the variant arose, when it expresses itself in increments, and when it fully expands in expression. It happened through phases.
Did environment play a part in it?
Environment, diet, and sexual selection.
Wow. I was having a conversation online with a brother, and he was one that denies that we are African genetically. Also, obviously, we have admixture from being here and families having plantation rape and all kind of things of that nature. But majority of our genetics is obviously Western Central African. And then so I began to show him, sickle cell disease and how it arose in Africa about 10,000 years ago. And I showed him how Africa has the highest rates of sickle cell disease and trait. And in America, obviously African Americans have the highest rate of sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait due to the fact that we are African genetically. If you can talk about some of the science of sickle cell disease and how it was a mutation found in Africa to prevent malaria.
Right. So when we talk about the hemoglobin, mutations in 2A and 2B within the hemoglobin level, when blood cells start to sickle, it was in defense for malaria, and it developed somewhere in between the wet Sahara around 10,000 years ago. So it was beneficial for these humans to have the sickle cell, and it's also in kinship to why we have fast twitch muscles, most sub-Saharan Africans. But not just that, but the levels of heterozygosity that African Americans have is also remnants of where they come from. Our human leukoantigens. There's a whole lot of things that's in remnants of our subequatorial root, the Duffy gene. To deny that is problematic, but sickle cell itself is a good example when it comes to about hemoglobin expression. I have the trait, a lot of us have the trait, which is in familiarity to our base root. But there are a lot of things that's a reminder of our subequatorial roots of where we come from, just not dealing with sickle cell.
You can't get into some of that.
Our lung response, certain things when it comes to, again, our immune responses, the way our lungs respond, the fast twitch muscles, the level of muscle density, the way we're able to deal with sprinting more than running like Eastern Africans when it comes to our sports, or the way we express ourselves in sports. All of that is a reminder of our subequatorial African roots, and that's what we still are. We're just misplaced Africans. We can't get past that.
Why are a lot of African Americans lactose intolerant?
That also is a reminder that the LCT gene, or the lactase consistent gene, we lack that because we come from Bantu speaking people who lacked it, who did not depend on a lot of milk. And some of our hunter gathering groups that we descend from in Western Central Africa who did not depend on a lot of milk. That's also a reminder of that, the lack of the LCT gene. Some of us do have it from some of us having Fulani ancestry who were pastoralists, but there's a specific type of LCT gene that the Pula had So once we understand that, mainly those Bantu speakers, they did not have the LCT gene. That's also a reminder of that. So once we get into all the mutations, anybody that talks against it, you can destroy them with just base. This is why we need to stick with just straight science and biology, because it kills the idea, because we're looking at allele expressions or gene expressions, and those gene expressions fully matches with the narrative that people would sense, like, you know, us is trying to teach and promote amongst the world.
Right, right. And let's, if you can, let's get into some culture a little bit too, because you know I often talk about the, you know, our diet is African Americans. A lot of it comes from, you know, our African heritage. You know, the fact that we even brought okra and watermelon and a certain type of rice over here, like physically on the slave trade, and how you know, the Congo Square was the origin of jazz. If you can, what are some things culturally that you see from your studies that connects us back to our roots as well?
I mean, you just said it. Jazz, blues, certain instruments that we used in blues and jazz.
The banjo.
Yeah, the okra, the
Mhm.
watermelon, the jambalaya, which is connected to willow rice.
Mm,
Certain superstitions that we have, you
mhm,
know, is a reminder of that. It's so much, man. Hip hop, you
mm,
know, roasting one another, joning one another.
mm,
That's a reminder of what the men did. If you study the Sanjata Keta Constitution, they used to joning was part of the culture, and
wow.
we do that here. Uh, and and hip hop within itself, poetry is also strongly connected to our roots back home.
Mhm,
To be able to be fluid or lyrical with words and
mhm,
expressing yourself overall in poetry, you know, all that's a reminder of our African roots. And that's why I say, you know, the culture that we have is an exterior African culture, because we came over here with culture and it became creolized in the new world.
mhm,
You
mhm,
know, even our dialect of English, AABE, African American Vernacular English,
mhm.
which come, or Ebonics, which is in kinship to the pidgin languages at first. When
Right.
we developed pidgin language that was similar to patois in the beginning,
Mhm,
the Gullah Geechee still have a strong strand of that. Some
mhm,
of us lost it when we became mainland Gullah, you
mhm.
know. But later on, the dialects of the vernacular changed based off city. It's just like in Memphis, they say, "Man, what up, man? What you on right there, man?" You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then in Chicago, we like, "What up, Joe? What you on, yo?" Oh, hell no, bro. Or you know, or you know, brothers in Texas got a specific vernacular. In New York, yo, what's up, God, peace, son? You know, all that shit. You know, you can hear it. Like we have different vernaculars that's been
Mhm,
creolized based off the borders of the world that we live in. That's a
mhm,
familiarity to
mhm,
our creolized African roots, and you can
mhm.
still hear it in
Right,
all of it. You know what I'm
right.
saying? So this is a part of us living in our hybrid cultural society. Man, it's still in kinship to patois speaking brothers on the Caribbean or in Jamaica. You
Mhm.
know, you can still hear it.
And some of those Maroons in Jamaica straight up speak Cromanti languages like they never left.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you this too. Um, with you being Muslim, a lot of times I see whenever you get on a platform, uh, to be such a such a scientific mind, a lot of times people can't reconcile the fact that how could somebody be so scientific and still be Muslim? What are your thoughts on that, and what is your idea of Allah?
Well, that's an interesting thing. Um, the idea of Allah is not bound by time and space, nor is it bound by mass and energy. Philosophically, I see Allah as vacuum energy, pure conscious, or this single point
Mm,
prior before the expansion 13.8 billion years ago that formed into mass energy. So it's hard to define that. Allah is just a name.
mhm,
Uh, Sufism, we call it one of the 100 attributes that people don't know about is who,
mm,
which he is. or and he is in a sense of dignity. I keep getting Texas. He is in a sense of dignity. We is in a sense of royalty. These are just symbolic descriptions of what's infinite, or the idea of what's infinite. So Allah, the God, or the power, the force, whatever you want to call it. Allah can mean nothing or no, the no. That supersedes matter or mass energy. So the way I view it is totally different than how some other people would or whatever. It's symbolic, and some things that we know is allegorical. It's not my place to I'm, I don't deal with Islam. I'm not a scholar, so I see it in my own way. I'm not an Islamic scholar, so they have their way and their position that should be respected. And the line shouldn't cross. So the way I see it is the way I see it, and I do believe in an idea of something greater than what's presented in matter or mass energy. You get what I'm trying to say? Mass energy deteriorates, it breaks down, but it all returns back to a vacuum space. And if we deal with the periodic tables, the more protons you have on the periodic table, the more the element changes its position. And the element, when once it changes the position, the element changes. The more protons, the more the element change. You have hydrogen, helium, lithium, carbon. The more protons you add on, the more the element changes on the periodic table. And then when you go below those protons, neutrons, and electrons, you go into, and those are subatomic particles. When you go below the proton and a neutron, you get into quarks. And it's only 6 flavors of quarks, which is those super subatomic particles or elementary particles. Up, down, charm, strange, top, and bottom. The top and down quarks is the main base that's responsible for, the up and down quarks are the main quarks that's responsible for subatomic particles. So 2 up quarks and 1 down quark forms a proton. 2 down quarks and 1 up quark forms a neutron. The position of the neutron is slightly larger than the proton, but when you go below that, you get into vectors. So if we go below, you get into the scope of the vacuum space, and that vacuum space, or that field of nothingness, is the source. And that emptiness that forms, and the Buddhist philosophy talks about emptiness is form, and form is emptiness, or Nam-myoho Reikyo, emptiness is form, and form is emptiness. You understand that behind every atom is 99.9% empty space, and this space is the peace that we all want to reach, and not be bound into concentrated energy that forms into matter based off a collapse of subatomic particles. The collapse is what we're dealing with. The collapse is the pressure, the stress, challenges, skin, bone, tissue. We all seek peace, and that peace is emptiness, and that emptiness is that vacuum state. This whole universe will collapse. And heat death, if you look up heat death, you can understand when all of this, the mirage, will dissolve back into nothingness, or that 0 point. So we all seek refuge in that empty space. That empty space is the power, because within that is what form comes from.
Right.
Ideal form.
Right.
The ideal form, because behind every atom is 99.9% empty space. Within that space is those small super subatomic particles that gets lower and lower and lower. And that in itself is the power that forms everything that we see, the forces that's responsible for matter. Weak gravitational nuclear force, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, and electromagnetic, which is the forces that govern over this. We're talking about the power that forms universe, stars, and galaxies, that pumps thermonuclear fusion in stars and all this stuff. But all of this stuff is a mirage. It's going to return back to that 0 point. And it's that peace that we seek refuge in. When we're going through stress and we pray and meditation, we pray to deliver ourselves from a certain space, from the tension that we accumulated. Or when we desire more within our space, we're praying to that space to make way for us to have the space, to get room, so our desire can express itself to gain what we want within this reality. That's the trick.
Yeah, that's deep. That's deep, God. And so that kind of made that sparked this question. So we know that the atom is 99.9% space, right?
Mhm.
How do we perceive physical matter the way we do when the atom is majorly is pretty much empty space, just like the universe?
Because we are electrons repelling off itself. Density can only respond to density. Mass can only respond to mass. So we can only deal with it from a mass angle. We can't deal with it from another angle because we are only expressing ourselves in a form of mass particles or mass energy. So we can only deal with things, but at the core of it, we're nothing but electrons repelling off itself. That's one thing. Once we understand that, like the TV that's right here, this couch, all of this is 99.9% empty space, but we're all these atoms networking with one another because the universe itself can only be expressed through mass. And it's also based off the concentration of observation, how particles express itself or radiate certain points that's being absorbed and observed. And through you receive the signals from this phone that I'm using and looking at you and looking at myself on the screen, receive the signals, and there is a pattern that these atoms is giving off that my eyes receive and goes through the visual cortex, make it to the cerebellum right here, and I make it out chemically in the brain, neurons, electrical cells, and make out the channeling of what the particles is saying or expressing itself as.
Mm.
So mass can only deal with mass the way mass should be done with mass. Until it completely dries up and deteriorates. This is why you age, because it has to dissolve out. You're dissolving, you're deteriorating. It has to play out until the atoms return back to empty space and those carbon atoms disperse back into the environment via death.
Right. Wow. So you mentioned 13.8 billion years ago and what we know as the Big Bang from a state of singularity. Do you think it's possible that the Big Bang and then expression of the universe is a continuous cycle?
Yeah, I believe in a big bounce theory. Theoretical physicists believe in it. I believe that it goes out and comes repel, goes out and repel. And a reminder of that, this is belief, but I support it.
Mhm.
It's the breath.
Mm.
In, out. You eat food to release it out. After your body get the nutrients, you release it out. You get water to get it to release it out. Everything is based off in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Everything.
Right.
Yeah. You wake up every day. You go to sleep, charge, get back up to do the same thing, in and out, in and out. So the organism condition, the way it functions, is a reminder of the tenet core of the universe. We're only a reflection of that in and outness, in and outness, in and outness. As you grow old, atoms or the cellular structure of the body changes every 7 years, the anatomy, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. In and outness, chemical reactions, which is your metabolism, in and outness.
Right.
All of this is a reminder of the in and outness. Even when this body expires itself and it deteriorates, and biodeprivation that we know is death, those atoms are still going to go through its own form of channeling or expression and deterioration of in and outness, even when it recycles itself back into the environment, epigenetics or the ecosystem. All living things and all non-living things. I don't want to say epigenetics, excuse me, but in ecology, you learn that all living things and all non-living things are connected. Or study forest fires and the benefits of forest fires. As harsh as it is, it's a lot of benefits that comes with a forest fire in the sense of renewal, in and outness. With destruction comes construction. With building comes destroying.
Right, exactly.
And this is the balancement of in and outness.
Wow. Yeah. So now that's deep, God. And so like when we look at a lot of times, esoteric thought, what Hermeticism as above, so below, and the fact that a lot of times an analogy is used for our physical bodies as like when we, as far as like we are a universe. There's a universe inside of us, right? And we have a heart that beats. We have DNA and RNA that has a function. We have these different organs that have a function that are comprised of, all of these different cells, right? And these cells have a function and they move as if they know what their function is, right? Like we're not telling them, you know, I need you to do this and do that. It's happening, right?
Yeah.
So I often think like, because I was building with Los, and he kind of put me on the ideas of panpsychism and the universe having a mind and the universe being intelligent. And
Yeah.
then and when we look at our own universe and we see these things functioning the way they are, as if it is embedded with a knowledge of what its function is, like, does that sound spooky to you, or like, you know
No,
what I'm saying?
no. Some people would say that we're supporting, in some angles, intelligent design,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll bring up the errors in the universe and say, well, if it's so intelligent, why do you have vesical organs, or why does certain things in the universe, why is there errors like a nebulas or clusters of stars functioning for no reason? What's the point of that space? Or why was this person born with artistic? What was the mistake in that? Intelligence is only based off the ability to. Intelligence and non-intelligence from a deeper angle don't exist. Everything just is.
Mm.
Errors and non-errors. So philosophically, when we look at the patterns of behavior, because things appear to be so organized, we say that's intelligent because of the ability to, because there's a consistency in patterns when it comes to the human species, the dog species, the cat species, the ant species, the stars, the patterns that we see. But when we start to see the errors, why was this person born with an extra limb?
Yeah.
Why was this ant born with a certain thing? Why? That's when we say, oh no, it's not that. But the problem is that it's a paradox. It is and it's not at one time. Once you understand a paradox, intelligence is only based off the ability to. So even in error, it was intelligently expressed because it's intelligently unintelligent. So if it's something missing, it was supposed to be that way because there was a malfunction or a certain element was missing in position for it not to express itself in the natural pattern. So it only makes sense intelligently for you to have outliers, and those outliers could be looked at as errors, and those errors are perfect even when it has its mishappening. So it's completely full of the larger spectrum, which is still in itself completely intelligent, so fucking intelligent that it's unintelligent at all. And this is when you get into the philosophy of just the way the Chinese call it Tao, or that just is.
And as somebody who has studied a lot of philosophy and not just science, right? Because we have seen quotes from minds like Einstein that talked about how he found both to be important, philosophy and science. Like he felt like one without the other was just bad business.
He quoted the pantheistic view, Spinoza. Said if there was an actual God, it has to be the God of Spinoza, the pantheistic view. So yeah.
What was that view?
Everything is connected. Everything, the totality of it all. If you study the pantheism, you have a view on how everything is just part of everything, and God is just that. It's not a spooky aspect of it.
Right.
So Spinoza's idea of it was very beautiful. But again, this is all philosophy. I'm more of a pantheistic person. But I don't like to use the labeling because everything has its place.
Right.
So when you understand everything has its place, I accept the misfaults, the good, the bad, the challenges, because it's all part of the full spectrum, which falls in line with pantheism, but not. I mean, it just falls in line with it. So you don't separate it. The spooky action at a different distance, as they spoke of in the quantum world, which is the unfamiliarity of the quantum particles' behavior, and the respondents to what the quantum particles make way for, which is mass energy, which I am and you are and everything around us. That's part of the totality.
Right.
That's the oneness.
And I got one more question for you, bro. Again, I appreciate you for taking the time. I've heard you break this down before, and I want the fans of the show who haven't heard you break this down just to hear it, because I appreciate the way you see certain philosophies from a scientific level. Whenever we are dealing with like the creation story in ancient Kemet, you had a dope breakdown of it. If you can, for those who may be unfamiliar with the creation story in Kemet, how do you see it?
The people in the Nile Valley, like, and most of the Africans, had beautiful creation stories. And even the ancient people all over the world, because remember, the first humans had animistic views leaving out of the continent. So the Nile Valley, which were agricultural society, and observing the environment gives you an idea of the behavior of life, or even within the universe, because these people were observing rains and drought and famine and different things. So they were able to tell stories metaphorically based off the surroundings that they were in. The same thing with the Yoruba and the Igbo, and even the ancient people in the late Pleistocene Europe, the Cro-Magnon people. If you start studying them, you start studying the mythology and storylines that's trying to explain the environment. So we create myths that make sense out of life. When it comes to the Nile Valley, people in Nile Valley, I think they had a beautiful story and explanation when they talked about the tears of Ra, because they had a bunch of creation myths, but we do know that we are stardust. And that is a familiarity or reminder of the tears of Ra, which created the form of man, or Geb and Nut. And it talks about the primordial point in the Ennead, and it talks about Hu and Huhat, which is boundless, Ku and Kukat, Amun and Amunet, which is hidden, Ku and Kukat, which is darkness. Amun and Amunet is hidden, the hidden potential. Hu and Huhat, which is boundless, Ku and Kukat, which is darkness, and Nun and Nunet, which is formlessness. And that's the quantum particles that's hidden before it makes way for. And not saying that they had this idea, because
right.
They have more of a primitive view, but a person that's observing in today's times, because those primitive understandings, some people classify it as primitive. I'm just speaking from a typical standard. Primal. They had a primal view. From today's standards, they can say this stuff makes way for who we are now, in a sense of our understanding.
Right.
Not saying that they had the tools that we have, but they had a great idea when they talked about the primordial point, or the hidden aspect that made way for the visible aspect that we can see. When you get into from the Agdog, or from the Agdog to the Ennead, when you get into Shu and Shushat, and from Shu and Shushat you have Tefnut, and then you get Geb, and you get the sky, the visible reality that we can see, and from that angle you can see how subatomic particles make way for the atomic particles, and atomic particles make way for the molecular. Molecules is a collection of atoms, and that makes way for DNA, the oxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid, which forms into cells. So the subatomic makes way for the atomic, and atomic make way for the molecular, and the molecular make way for what we see on the surface on a biological level. And that makes sense.
Right.
So the hidden makes way for the visible.
Yeah.
Just like when you close your eyes, you visualize things in your head, you may dream about it at night subconsciously, and you wake up back to this reality. That within itself is the idea of Amun Ra, the hidden light, Close your eyes, you still see, you know,
Right.
still signals.
Man, God, I definitely appreciate you for coming through. I know the people will love this one, man. And again, man, I salute you, man, just for the you know, everything that you do, man, and help to spark, you know, scientific literacy within our people, and even being able to, you know, hop in the philosophy lane and be just as proficient. We definitely appreciate you, bro, and thank you for coming through.
Man, I appreciate you. Assalamu alaikum, wa salu nation. We definitely promoting our Mandinka identity, venerating back to Mali. And when we say Mali, we stretch from Sierra Leone, Gambia, modern day Mali, Liberia, all of that which Sunjata Keita made way for in the kingdom. And the Mandinka Constitution will be respected, and we're doing it now. And this also merges, you know, Mandinka, Fulani, and all the populations that makes way for what we are in North America, extending back. So we networking on that. So Wasalu Nation, the last ruler, Samori Tore, we were in reminders of that continuation. So assalamu alaikum, peace to you, King. I appreciate you.
No doubt, God. I'll be with you later, bro.
Peace.
Peace.